Hi, on today's video I will be building a wall-mounted standing desk for my wife from this wood that was going to end up as firewood. So, bit over a year ago my aunt sent me a message asking if I would want to pick up some birch cherry and apple tree logs that they had cut down. The other alternative was that if I didn't need those, they would just make firewood out of them and burn them in the fireplace and sauna. The wood has now been sitting over a year in the shop, waiting to dry up and waiting for me to come up with a project for them. And as I mentioned, I got the wood in logs, but luckily here on the countryside where we live, I have neighbors who have saws to cut logs into planks, so I got one of them to do that for me. Before I got to really building, there was a lot of prep work that needed to be done, as the planks were really just rough cut and they were quite twisted as well. I first used the Greg AccuCut jig to get a straight edge on the board, but as my circular saws blade isn't big enough with the jig to cut through the piece, I had to finish the cut with a pull saw. Then, after multiple hours at the jointer and planer, I was ready to go to the table saw and start ripping the boards to pieces for the tabletop. After having enough pieces, I started laying them out to see what would look nice, as the boards have knots and other marks on them. And once I was happy, I could lay them on the clamps, but before gluing them up, doing one last thing on the jointer by marking each edge with I's and O's for ins and outs, and then run them through the jointer to get a clean glue seam. After the glue up had dried, I needed to start hand planing the top, as it isn't dead flat from the glue up. This step would be a lot easier with either having a wide enough planer or using something like dominoes to line up the boards. Once I was happy with the top, I could then just cut it to size on the table saw. Next, it was time to start working on the base. First rip cutting enough pieces for it, and then starting to lay them up to figure out what length I would need to cut them to. First, cutting one end straight and then with the stop block cutting them to size to be able to match the piece on the other side. And if you are enjoying the video, please consider leaving it a like. It helps the video to spread out to more people and helps out the channel. And if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel as well. Then, for whatever reason, I decided that now would be a good time to stop working on the base and fix some of the small knot holes I had on the tabletop. First carving out the knot or whatever rod there was, and then mixing up some wood glue and wood dust and filling the holes with that. The holes on the top of the table were really small, so you won't really notice them after this. Once I was done with that side adventure, I got back on the base and started prepping for the joinery. Again, going with dowels. First, drilling the holes to the ends with a doweling jig, and then using marking pins to mark the corresponding holes to the other pieces before drilling the holes on the drill press. Then it was time to start assembling the base. I will be doing that in 2 steps. First assembling the piece that is under the table and the piece that faces the wall separately. Once everything was in clamps, I made sure with a tape measure that everything was square. Once the glue up had dried, I started sanding the pieces, as doing that for the base is now much easier than when it is fully assembled. I also needed to sand the tabletop, as I hadn't done that before. After the sanding, I also wanted to add a chamfer to 3 edges of the table, sides and the front. So I took out the router and a chamfer bit and went to work. This was also a good point to add my maker's mark to the bottom of the table as well. Then I also hand sanded all the edges to break them a bit, and then the tabletop was ready for finish. But before I could get to finishing, I needed to fully assemble the base. Once I had the 2 pieces connected, I could finally cut these brace pieces that will help to support the tabletop. I had not cut these before because I thought it is easier to get the right length for the pieces with cutting one end to 45 degrees, then laying the piece on top of the base and marking how long the piece should be, and then cutting the other end to 45 degrees as well. And I must say that it was quite easy doing it this way. Before attaching the brace pieces, I wanted to make the holes for mounting the base on the wall as well as the holes for mounting the tabletop to the base. First making a hole with Forstner bit to midway through the thickness of the base, and then with a smaller drill bit drilling all the way through. And I guess the tabletop technically wasn't ready for finishing, as I said earlier, as I still needed to drill these holes on that as well, so I did that. Then I thought that it might be easier to prep for installation now that the base was still relatively light rather than after it was fully finished. So I went inside and with the help of my wife I marked down on the wall where the installation holes would needed to be drilled and prepped those. Next, I could get back on the brace pieces I got earlier. From the beginning of the project, I knew I would be adding these, but I didn't know what would be the best way to connect them to the rest of the base. Eventually, I decided that I will just hook them up with screws, because no one will see them. The ones from the top are under the tabletop and the others are between wall and the base. So I put on some wood glue on them, added some CA glue to get them to stay together before drilling the holes and then adding a couple of screws to them. Now it is plenty strong and you won't be able to tell that there are screws hidden after this is on the wall. Then it was only needing to be finished. For the finish I went with Osmos oil wax, which has a light white tint to it. As this will be in our bedroom and our nightstands and our dog's beds are finished with the same stuff, my wife wanted this on the table as well to match. I added 2 coats on this one as it will be in active use, and once the finish had dried, it was just matter of attaching the top and then installing the whole thing on the pre-drilled holes with some screws. Quite simple but really nice project, and most importantly something that my wife has wanted, so she doesn't need to work from the kitchen table. And I think it's super nice that I know exactly where the wood is from, and I was able to utilize it in this way instead of it just getting burned. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.